My friend, let me ask you a question that might hit a little closer to home than you expect. Have you ever thought you were doing something good for your health? Something the magazines, the television, even your neighbors all swore was healthy, only to find out later it was quietly making things worse? Maybe you started a diet that promised more energy, but left you sluggish. Or you took up an exercise that was supposed to build strength, but left you in more pain than before. For men after 60, the margin for error is smaller, and the advice floating around out there isn't always made for us. And sometimes, those so-called healthy habits come with hidden costs. Costs that affect not just your energy, not just your mood, but even your most private and personal confidence. That's exactly what happened to a gentleman I'll call Harold. He's 71, still sharp, still active, still proud of being able to keep up with his grandchildren. A few years back, Harold took it upon himself to get healthier. He'd read articles online, picked up routines from friends, even sought tips on TV doctors. He stuck to it faithfully. At first, he thought he was on the right path. His cholesterol numbers dipped, his weight looked steady, but then something strange happened. The very part of life that gave him joy, the intimacy with his wife of 50 years, began to slip away. His erections were weaker, his desire lower, and he couldn't understand why. After all, wasn't he doing what he was told was healthy? That's when Harold came to me. My name is Dr. Nolan Easton. I've spent more than 30 years in men's health, specializing in the changes men face after 60. And I'll tell you, Harold's story is not rare. In fact, I hear versions of it every week. Men who thought they were doing everything right, but found themselves robbed of strength, robbed of vitality, and yes, robbed of their erections. And in many cases, the culprit isn't age alone. It's one of these so-called healthy habits that's been quietly undermining them from within. Now, before we dive deeper, I want to pause and make sure you, my listener, get something important from this. This conversation isn't about shame. It isn't about fear. It's about clarity. Because the truth is, when you know the hidden dangers, you can protect yourself. You can rebuild. You can reclaim not just your health, but your manhood. And that's why I'm here today. To tell you plainly, there is a habit, one that men over 60 often pick up in the name of health, that is in fact killing erections silently. And stopping it now could be the turning point you've been waiting for. Harold's case taught me a lot about how habits can betray us. He was eating what he thought was a heart-healthy breakfast every morning, exercising in a way he thought was keeping him lean, and cutting out things he thought were harmful. On paper, it looked right. But the body doesn't read paper. The body responds to real signals: circulation, hormones, vascular health, nerve sensitivity. And when one piece gets knocked off balance, it doesn't matter what your cholesterol score is. If your circulation to the groin is compromised, the intimacy part of your life begins to collapse. And Harold, like many men, didn't see the connection right away because the changes didn't come overnight. They were gradual. First, he noticed less frequent morning erections. Then, when he and his wife tried to be together, he found it harder to sustain. Over time, the very confidence he carried into every part of life began to erode. He started avoiding intimacy altogether, not because he didn't want it, but because he didn't want to feel embarrassed. And let me tell you, that quiet withdrawal is something I've seen in so many of my patients. Men who once stood tall begin to shrink into themselves, not physically, but emotionally. And this is where I stop and look directly at you, my friend, watching this. If this is speaking to you, if you've ever thought, I'm losing a part of myself and I don't know why, then let me know in the comments with a simple yes or no. That way I can tailor my advice more closely to you. I do read those answers. They help me guide these conversations so they're not abstract but personal. And if you're finding value here, Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and tap that little bell so you never miss the advice that could make all the difference in your life after 60. Now, back to Harold. When we sat down, we unpacked his daily routine, and that's when the truth came out. The very breakfast he thought was healthy, the very exercise he thought was good for circulation, were in fact stripping his testosterone, straining his arteries, and worsening his erection health. In other words, the advice meant for 20 or 30-year-olds had become poison for a 71-year-old man's body. I've seen this pattern so often. Men reading the same magazines their sons read, following the same fitness gurus their grandsons watch, only to find that their own physiology doesn't play by those same rules anymore. The senior body, especially after 60, runs on a different operating system, and what looks like health in one context can be the undoing of health in another. And here's the hopeful part. When Harold stopped the habit we identified, his body didn't just continue to decline. No, within weeks, small sparks of recovery began. He told me with a laugh that his wife had noticed before he did. His energy lifted, his mornings looked different, his confidence began to return. And by 3 months, intimacy wasn't just possible again, it was enjoyable, affirming, and deeply healing for his marriage. That's why I say this plainly. Men 60 and above need to know that not every healthy routine out there is meant for you. Some are actively working against your erections, your energy, and your manhood. And my job is to help you see clearly which habits help and which habits harm, so you can step into these years not as a shadow of your younger self, but as a man with wisdom, vitality, and presence. So let's keep walking together through this conversation, because once you recognize what Harold and so many other men discovered, the hidden danger in a seemingly innocent habit, you gain the power to stop it, and in doing so, you gain back far more than just function. You gain back the sense of yourself that makes every other part of life richer.
When Harold and I sat together in my office, I asked him to walk me through his mornings step by step. He leaned back, thought for a moment, and said, "Well, Doc, I start every day the same way. I pour myself a big bowl of bran cereal, add some skim milk, maybe a banana, and wash it down with a tall glass of orange juice. Then I head out for a jog around the neighborhood." Now, if you read that in a health magazine, you'd think, perfect, that's what every older man should be doing. Fiber cereal, fruit, juice, cardio exercise, it all sounds right, doesn't it? But here's the truth most men over 60 aren't being told. For an aging body, that very routine can sabotage your manhood, and Harold was living proof. Let's start with the breakfast. A giant bowl of processed cereal, skim milk, and a glass of juice. On the surface, it seems heart-friendly. But when you peel back the label, it's a sugar storm. That orange juice, even though it says 100% natural, sends your blood sugar soaring. The bran cereal, yes, it has fiber, but it's also full of hidden starches that convert to sugar just as fast. And skim milk, stripped of fat, which your hormones actually need, it delivers lactose sugar without the balance of healthy fat that slows digestion. What happens when all that sugar floods the bloodstream? Your insulin spikes. And here's the part most men never hear. Repeated spikes of insulin damage the delicate lining of your blood vessels. They make your arteries stiff, less flexible. And the first arteries to pay the price are the tiny ones, the vessels that feed blood into your penis. So while Harold thought he was doing his heart a favor, what he was really doing was starving his erections of blood flow. Then came the jog. Again, jogging sounds wonderful, right? But Harold was pounding the pavement on aging knees with joints that had lost their cushioning. That daily stress wasn't strengthening his circulation, it was raising cortisol, his stress hormone. And high cortisol levels act like poison to testosterone. When testosterone drops, erections weaken. His healthy routine was a double blow, hurting his blood vessels and draining his hormones at the same time. I remember leaning in and telling Harold, "Your body's not a 25-year-old's body anymore. What fueled you then can sink you now." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "Doc, are you telling me my breakfast and my jogging are the reason I can't perform in the bedroom?" And I said gently, "Yes, Harold, that's exactly what I'm telling you." And my friend, if you're watching this right now and recognizing yourself, maybe you've been downing that orange juice every morning or jogging because everyone says it's heart healthy, I want you to know this. This isn't about blame. You didn't do anything wrong. You simply followed the advice that was everywhere. But just like Harold, you may need to update the rules for the body you live in today. Now, why is this so important for men over 60? Because erections are like a canary in the coal mine. They are one of the first signs of circulation health. When blood doesn't reach your groin the way it used to, it's not just your intimacy at risk. It's a warning light that your arteries may be under attack elsewhere, in your heart, in your brain. And if you ignore it, the price is much steeper than embarrassment. That's why I always tell my patients, protecting your erections isn't vanity, it's life-saving. At this point, Harold leaned forward and asked the question every man eventually asks me. So what do I do instead? That's where the hope comes in. Because when you stop the harmful habit, when you cut the sugar floods, when you stop beating your body with the wrong kind of exercise, your body responds. It's like flipping a switch. Blood flow begins to recover, hormones stabilize, and that spark of manhood returns. But I'll be honest, many men resist this truth at first. Why? Because it feels counterintuitive. We've been told for decades that skim milk is better, that juice is healthy, that cardio is king. And breaking those beliefs takes courage. Harold told me, "Doc, I've been doing this for years. It's hard to imagine my mornings any other way." And I smiled at him and said, "I understand, Harold, but let me ask you, is it harder to imagine changing breakfast or harder to imagine losing the part of life that makes you feel like a man?" He didn't answer right away, but his wife did weeks later. She came into the office with him and said, "Whatever you told him, it's working. He's more alive, he's more confident, and he's back." That's when Harold admitted, "I thought it was too late for me, but it wasn't. It just took changing one habit." Now, I want to pause here and talk directly to you, my viewer. If Harold's story feels familiar, if you've noticed your energy fading, your intimacy slipping, I want you to let me know in the comments with a simple yes or no. It helps me see how widespread this is among men like you, and it helps me craft the right advice for future videos. And if you haven't already, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and tap that bell icon. It makes sure you don't miss the kind of information that could turn your health around. Let's come back to the bigger picture. The danger of these healthy habits is not just in the physical damage, they steal your confidence too. Harold confessed that before we met, he'd started making excuses to his wife. He said he was too tired or he'd had a long day, but deep down, he was ashamed. That shame is heavy. It makes men retreat, pull away from the very relationships that could support them. And that isolation can be more dangerous than any breakfast cereal. But when he reversed course, something powerful happened. Not only did his erections improve, but his entire demeanor changed. His wife said his laughter came back. His children noticed he was more engaged at family dinners. His grandkids saw a sparkle in his eye again. And that's the truth so many men miss. This isn't just about sex. It's about vitality. It's about how you show up in every part of life. That's why I'm urging you to think carefully about the habits you've been told are healthy. Because if they're quietly draining your circulation, crushing your testosterone, and leaving you weaker where you most want to be strong, then the cost is far too high. Harold learned that in time to turn things around, and so can you. When Harold began adjusting his mornings, something remarkable happened. It didn't happen all at once, but in quiet, steady steps that built on each other. The first thing he noticed wasn't even in the bedroom, it was in the way he woke up. For years, Harold had rolled out of bed feeling groggy, almost hungover, even though he didn't drink. After cutting out that sugar-heavy breakfast and replacing his jog with gentler movement, his mornings became lighter. He said, "Doc, I didn't know how heavy I felt until I started feeling light again." This is what I want every man over 60 to understand. Your body still has an incredible ability to heal. Your circulation, your energy, even your erections. They are not gone, they are waiting. But they can only return when you stop blocking them with habits that sabotage your hormones and blood flow. That's the part most men don't realize. They think, "I'm old, this is just what happens." But the truth is, in many cases, it's not age, it's damage. And damage can be repaired. Let me explain in simple terms how this works. Erections depend on three things working together: blood flow, nerve signals, and hormones. If any one of those three is weakened, your performance suffers. In Harold's case, the sugar surges were stiffening his arteries and starving blood flow. The constant jogging was raising cortisol, which pulled his testosterone down. And the combination dulled his nerve sensitivity, so even when he did get aroused, the response was muted. When we fixed the root causes, his body began to reverse course. His blood vessels relaxed, his testosterone began climbing back up, his nerves woke up, so to speak. And that's why within weeks, the changes were noticeable. Think about that. After years of decline, only weeks were needed to start the turnaround. That is how forgiving the body can be if you simply stop punishing it. And Harold isn't the only one. Another patient of mine, Frank, age 68, came to me after nearly giving up hope. He told me he had a drawer full of little blue pills that didn't work the way they used to. He felt trapped, paying money for something that only gave him headaches and disappointment. His wife had stopped expecting anything, and he felt more like roommates than partners. When I asked about his routine, I saw the same red flags: high-sugar health foods, endless cardio, and the belief that fat was the enemy. I guided Frank the same way I guided Harold. Cut the hidden sugar, add healthy fats back in, and swap the long, punishing cardio for shorter, strength-building movements. Within 2 months, Frank came back with tears in his eyes. He said, "Doc, I don't need those pills anymore. I've got myself back." And the best part? His wife leaned over, squeezed his hand, and said, "He's not the only one who's happier." Now, I want to pause here and speak directly to you, my friend, watching this. If you've ever felt like Harold or Frank, tired, frustrated, ashamed, maybe even thinking your best years are behind you, I want you to know they are not. You can reclaim more than you think. And if this message resonates with you, do me a favor, drop a simple yes or no in the comments below. I look at those responses because they tell me whether I'm speaking to your life, not just giving abstract advice. And if you're finding this conversation useful, please like this video, subscribe, and tap that little bell icon. That way, you'll always get the tools you need to protect your health and your manhood. One of the biggest breakthroughs for men like Harold and Frank is realizing that testosterone isn't something you lose forever after 60. Yes, levels drop naturally with age, but lifestyle habits are the real driver of the steep declines. When you flood your system with sugar and stress hormones, testosterone production slows dramatically. But when you restore balance, when you eat foods that support hormones, move your body in ways that build muscle instead of breaking it down, and protect your sleep, your testosterone rises again. And with it rises your energy, your confidence, and your erections. Let me share something Harold told me a few months after his changes. He said, "Doc, I thought the best I could hope for at my age was to limp along. But I was wrong. My wife told me the other night, 'You feel like the man I married.'" That one sentence erased years of shame for him. And that's what I want for you. Not just function, but pride. Not just intimacy, but joy. This is why I tell men that erections are about much more than sex. They're about vitality. They're about showing up in your marriage, in your family, even in the way you carry yourself at the grocery store. When you know your body still works, you stand taller, and the people around you notice. But here's the key lesson I want you to take. The turnaround doesn't come from more pills, more gimmicks, or punishing yourself with routines that don't fit your age. It comes from stopping the so-called healthy habits that are actually killing your erections. Just like Harold, just like Frank, the moment you stop feeding the problem, your body begins to heal. And I'll tell you one more thing. The men who make these changes often tell me, "Doc, I wish I had known this 10 years ago." That's why I share these stories with you, so you don't waste more time living half a life, so you don't accept weakness when strength is still within reach, so you can step into your 60s, 70s, and beyond, not as a man fading away, but as a man reclaiming what's rightfully his. When Harold came in for his last follow-up, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Thank you for giving me back my life." But I reminded him, "Harold, I didn't give you back your life, you did. You had the courage to change. You had the wisdom to stop a habit that was hurting you. I just pointed the way." And my friend, that's exactly what I want for you.
When Harold sat in my office that last time, he wasn't the same man who had walked in months earlier. The first time I met him, he carried himself with quiet frustration. His shoulders were a little hunched, his voice lower, his eyes tired. But now, after changing that one so-called healthy habit that was destroying his manhood, he looked alive again. His posture was stronger, his eyes had energy. His wife smiled at him with the kind of warmth that comes when love and intimacy have been restored. And Harold said to me, "Doc, I feel like I've been given a second chance." That, my friend, is what I want for you, because I know how many men after 60 are struggling in silence. They don't talk about it with their friends. They don't want to worry their wives. Some even convince themselves it's just part of getting old. But Harold's story and the stories of men like Frank and so many others prove otherwise. Your body is still capable of vitality, strength, and yes, firm and reliable erections, but only if you stop the habits that quietly rob you of those gifts. Let me bring it back to something simple. Erections are not just about the bedroom. They are about circulation. They are about blood flow. They are about the strength of your heart and the health of your arteries. When you restore them, you're not just improving intimacy, you're improving your entire body. That's why I tell men, if you want to protect your life, protect your erections. The two go hand in hand. Harold learned that when he cut out the sugar storm at breakfast and swapped his draining cardio for smarter, age-appropriate exercise. In just weeks, he noticed changes. In months, he saw transformation. And in time, he gained not just back his erections, but his confidence as a husband, a father, and a man. I want you to imagine that same transformation for yourself. Imagine waking up with energy instead of grogginess. Imagine looking at your wife or your partner and feeling that spark again, knowing you can follow through. Imagine walking taller, knowing you've taken control of your health instead of letting your habits control you. That is possible. It is not too late. It is waiting for you the moment you stop doing what's been hurting you. And yes, it takes courage. Harold had to face the truth that what he thought was healthy was actually killing his erections. That wasn't easy for him to hear. But by making that choice, he gave himself years of joy he thought were lost forever. And so can you. I want to pause here and speak directly to you again. If Harold's journey has spoken to you, if you see yourself in his story, I want you to let me know in the comments with a simple yes or no. Those answers matter. They guide me. They show me what men like you are facing, and they help me continue giving advice that makes a difference. And if you found this message helpful, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and tap that little bell icon. It makes sure you never miss another piece of advice that could change your health, your manhood, and your future. Now, let me tell you something Harold's wife said to me that I will never forget. She leaned forward, smiling, and whispered, "Thank you, doctor. I got my husband back." That sentence carries so much weight because it shows us this isn't just about one man. It's about the people who love him. When you take care of yourself, when you restore your vitality,
You're not just doing it for you. You're doing it for your wife, for your family, for everyone who looks up to you. You're giving them the gift of your presence, your energy, your laughter. And that, my friend, is why this matters so deeply. We live in a culture that tells men over 60 to step aside, to fade into the background. But I believe the opposite. I believe these years can be the most powerful of your life if you have the wisdom to care for your body in the right way. Not by following outdated advice meant for younger men, but by honoring the needs of your body today. So, let me leave you with this. The habit you thought was healthy may be the very thing holding you back. But the moment you stop it, you open the door to recovery, to intimacy, to strength. Just like Harold discovered, it is never too late to turn things around. You can stop living in quiet frustration. You can reclaim your erections, your confidence, your joy. And when you do, every part of life feels brighter. I want you to take that hope with you today. Carry it with you. Remember Harold. Remember that transformation is possible. And remember that you too can feel like the man you were always meant to be, strong, capable, loved, and alive. This is Dr. Nolan Easton, and I want to thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you've taken this message to heart. Protect your health, protect your manhood, and, most of all, protect the joy that still belongs to you. Take care, my friend.